And then there's another line that we didn't look at together, and that is yes, the Elu Hen Norotav. Now the Anshe Knesset Agdola. This is Anshe Knesset Agdola. Yes, take up the falling off. Daniel's not saying Norah, that the divine isn't Norah, because if it's enemies, if Israel's enemies, and of course it can be Cambodia, it can be other peoples too. All, as we just said from the Amos verse, I mean, everyone is God's peoples, and so all too often we have a situation where how can people be suffering to such a horrific degree and degree and kind, such that then the divine obviously is not feared. People go ahead if they want and do the most awful things in broadest daylight, even for years and years, as an official government policy. Even, I mean, it just is devastating. It just the mind can't grasp. But the Anshe Knesset Agololot will come along and they say, no, but you can reinterpret Nora as well. In a more here, it's really not reinterpreted fully. It continues to resonate something of its literal conventional meaning, only it's much more limited. So very often we don't have the Norah, all too often, as I say, to the tune of millions. We say tune. We know that the Nazis at Auschwitz and at other so-called camps, sites of horrific murder, had Jews playing musical instruments while their fellows went to the gas chamber. And Paul Celan has his poem Death Fugue, yes, about that. It's his most famous poem. Look it up on the web if you don't know it. Paul Celan, C-E-L-A-N, Death Fugue. But it's very more limited, namely, She'il Malay, yes? Is it? Let's see, where is it? Yeah. Didn't say. About there. Ilmale. She'ilmale Mora'o Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yes? If it were not for the fear, the awe that people have of the sacred, may it be blessed, of the Holy One, blessed be He, that, yes, is indeed evoked by people. People indeed feel, again, not to the extent and not as often, all too often not. But in some sense, there's some sort of degree and kind of mora, aleph, right, of fear, of fright, of being seized by awe before the sacred, before the spirit. Because if not, He'ach uma achat yichola lehitkayem bein ha'umot. Again, because if not, He'ach, Eich, Kitzad, how can Ummah Achat, can one nation, one small nation against so many enemies all the time, Yichola Lihitzkayem Bein Ha'umot, how can such a small people continue to exist among the nations? Again, here it doesn't mean all nations are enemies of Israel. But all you need is one very strong enemy. And so there is something to be said for some kind of intervention, or I would call it involvement. It's very indirect, but somehow the Spirit makes sure that there's some saving remnant, so-called Sherita Plata. I think it was Voltaire, who was asked what his proof of God is. People went to making proofs of God, coming up with arguments of how to prove the existence of the divine in a rather scientific, kind of a very logical way. So he said it's the Jewish people. How such a people continue and continue and continue somehow. Though again, the destruction can be brutal. In the Holocaust, we witnessed the destruction, Raoul Hilberg's book, the destruction of European Jewry. Almost to a total. The Nazis get a very high grade. They get an A-. It's really between an A- and an A. You'd have to give them that grade. Well, we have 3 more weeks together, and how much can you put up with this? So soon I'll have to ask your forgiveness for it all, my demands upon you, and everything, this madness that you've had to go along with, and deal with, and figure out the confusion, etc. The being left alone. It just seems God leaves a modeling the ultimate teacher in some sense. So we have 3 more weeks. We continue now through Tuesday night, early Wednesday morning, and then we'll have 1 more week. It won't be very much reading. It won't be. There won't be any videos. It really won't be anything in quantity like we've had before, and especially this week. It'll be devoted to Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, and it'll be again a piece of curriculum that I developed for 10th, 11th, 12th graders. But many people sometimes they'll say to me, Steve, this is great, your approach. You're fantastic. But really, I'm teaching kindergarten. I'm teaching 1st, 2nd, or 3rd grade. So all this philosophy, I really don't have to go there. I don't need to go into all that philosophy. Buzz. Wrong. This is the wrong understanding. Because you still have to make choices. See, curriculum means choosing certain experiences which you think are educative, and then ordering them in a certain sequence. To put it simply, formally, in terms of the form of the thing on the surface. So it's not just surface. It's to make these choices of which experiences are educative, and then how to share that with whatever age group. Let's say we're going to teach the creation of the world to kindergarten, or 1st, 2nd, 3rd graders, 4th graders. You still have to read Herman Cohen or somebody, your favorite authors, and some new authors you don't know. You still have to first teach it to yourself on an adult level. You say, Steve, but why? It's just kindergarten. I'm not going to tell them about Herman Cohen. That's right, you're not. You're not going to mention Herman Cohen. We read Herman Cohen, and he says, the idea of humanity, that we all share something together. Because if you really look, we don't have one humanity. We have people with different color skins, different physical appearances. If you have an apartment building with people from different countries, the sounds from the other apartment when they're yelling or making love or whatever is in strange languages. The cooking smells, or the food smells are different, and the clothing is often different. Differences in culture and religious life. So it's really an idea, says Herman Cohen, of humanity, because you actually, in each instance of human beings and groups of human beings, there's so much that is not in common. So where does it come from, the idea of humanity, that we share something in common? He says it comes from monotheism. When you have the development of monotheism, you have the idea that there's one ultimate truth, ultimate reality behind everything. And everything comes from that, everyone and everything. All sentient beings and rocks and everything, stars, and everything comes from the one. And Judaism would say, Islam would say, the unique. So we have this in common. Is it true? In terms, very often we have to ask when we have depictions like that, arguments about the development of human consciousness and connections between ideas and yes, achievements and or failings, weaknesses in human development of human consciousness. But we have to ask also, I mean, is that true? It's hard to figure that out, really. But it is beautiful, I think. And it could be an educative idea that could inspire people and affect their perception, our perception, our behavior, ours and our students. And of course, the Zohar has this image that all of existence is an upside-down tree. Upside down because the roots are going, and then they are forming the tree, the roots. And the roots, I suppose, are the Platonic ideas, the ideals of, what a starfish is, what this and every aspect of the universe, and what is in the world and the universe, all comes from ideals of what makes a starfish, what makes a table, and justice, and etc. But then you have a root of all roots, shorish v'shorashim, and that's the divine, that's the Godhead, that's the Creator, and then you have the trunk of the tree, which is Adam, or Adam and Eve. And then we have the branches, and the branches and the leaves are, again, everything that exists in its particularity, in specific instances of different cultures and people and animals, and old and young and tall and skinny. I don't know why I thought of tall and skinny. And all ages of people, and etc. And seagulls, and etc. So seagulls have to watch out for the Exxon Corporation. If they're living in Alaska or something, where Exxon, has set up a oil pipeline. But of course, if we don't have the oil pipeline, then we won't have the gasoline to all get into our individual cars and heat up the planet for our children and children's children. But all right, let's not go there. But of course, I tried to go everywhere. I mean, and take in the entire universe, or at least half of it. So I come back. If I'm going to be teaching the creation drama to kindergarten, I still have to decide, what are we going to do? First, I have to choose a book. I want to tell them the story. So I either look in the library for the books, the children's books that exist about creation. But if I do, how do I choose? Which book will I choose? Or if I'm looking for a curriculum, I don't have time now to develop my own curriculum. And the curriculum will include, for young children, storybooks about creation, what to do in sharing those stories. So if I'm looking for a curriculum, also there are different curricula in the library, for teaching kindergarten, first, second, third grade creation. So how will I choose? What will my criteria be for choosing which storybook, which curricula? If it's a whole curriculum. So in order to make the choice, I have to know myself quite a lot. I have to have an in-depth understanding myself that I've taught myself. Yoma, well made. This is an important secret, an important principle. First, we have to teach ourselves. First, it's what are my truths? Don't think of the student first, or how you're going to teach it. First, figure out if you have something rich to teach, to share. Then you think about who is the student. And are there elements similar in the student's experience to elements that I found similar between that part of the tradition I want to teach and those texts and ideas and my own experience? I start with myself. But then I think of the students for sure. Are there elements in their experience which are similar to these elements that I identified? I located those meeting points between myself and my experience and the experience witnessed in the text as best as I can make it out to be. We're going back to Michael Fishbank, yes, that the teacher's role is to model a possibility, the possibility that these ancient texts, that the texts received from our tradition, that there can be meeting points, points of intersection between those texts and that religious language, and those images, and the narratives, and those practices in the halakha, that there can be meeting points between them and our own contemporary experience as Jewish past human beings that involve something actually universal, shared by all humans, that they can recognize. Jacob Bronowski calls it the act of recognition. I recognize myself in the poem, in the play, in the broken matzah, in the newness, the new possibilities of spring. I recognize myself in the orphanhood of Esther and Mordechai, that they're in exile. She's an orphan. We're all orphans. Literature is always about art, religion, music. Poetry is always about theater, dance. It is our life that is being addressed, even though it seems to be about somebody else. It's about us. We're all Abraham. We're all the children of Israel with the Egyptian army at our back and the sea in front. Not every day of our lives, but very many of them, as individuals and as collectives, as Israel and as humanity. Let's not forget, we're part of Klal Yisrael. We're part of also Klal Adam. Oy lanu, we should forget that. Remember the Rav Kook text. So we'll be looking at Ecclesiastes a little bit, some curriculum that I developed. Coming back to if I'm teaching kindergarten. Let's say I want to make a mural about the creation for my students in kindergarten or first, second, third grade, fourth grade. Okay, what will I make a mural? What will we make a mural of? What will we make a mural of? Will I make a mural of what was created on the first day, second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day? If you follow that, actually. If you accept it on face value. Because if we really look at it, many people see what the Greeks called a chiasm. We see a poetic structure. And really the order is 1, 4, 2, 5, 3, 6. You take a look. The latter numbers, the seconds of each couple, are detailing the generality of the first. Rashi also says that points this out and says that there's not really. He says it's not in a kind of sequential order. He doesn't call it scientific, but so. Is that what we're going to do? Do you want to do that for your mural with your kindergarten, first, second, third grade? I argue that if you do that, you're really emphasizing a literal understanding of the Bible, and that's what it's mainly about. You say the word literal. You didn't ever say the word literal. You never said the word poetic or symbolic, which is good. You're not going to say that to whatever your approach is, even if that is your approach, that it's metaphor, that it's figurative, and not a scientific depiction of the world's, how the world came to be. Science addresses how the world came to be, the process by which it came to be. Science does not address the question of why it came to be and who is involved. And rather than, instead of process, it doesn't address the question of purpose. What purpose is the world here for? Are we here? That's what religion and art, music, poetry, dance, theater, literature address. So they're not in contradiction. They're just answering different questions. They're responding to different questions. So they're both true in a sense. But not both true because one day is really a million years or something. They're also both true, but in a very different way. Here in the argument I'm sharing with you, the perspective, they're both true because they're talking about different truths. They're responding to different things. So I argue that if you do the first day, second day, third day, without ever saying literal or poetry or getting into that, that's what you're really emphasizing, literal. And when they get to be in the 6th or 7th grade or the 8th grade, and someone says to them, "Oh, you're doing Bible in school," well, of course, that's a stupid book. I mean, primitive book. Creation of the world. We know that science is, even if we say one day equals a million years, that still means that the better, the more exact, accurate depiction of how the world came to be, of the process by which it came to be, you're going to know from science. That's the vagueness of one day or something. There's all kinds of stuff there that is not accurate enough. And they'll say, well, why do you do that? So Bible is primitive, and then the kid will say, oh yeah, I vaguely remember when I was in kindergarten, or first, second, third grade, we learned about creation, and that's kind of like what we were taught. But instead, if you make a mural, if your mural you make with your students, or your sound and light show, multimedia with slides and music, etc., you put together, and then you make a mural together. You roll out the paper on the floor and the paints. Instead, if you make an upside-down tree, and you already draw something like that in a general, sense, and then you have all kinds of magazines for collage and pictures of nature and pictures of different people from different cultures and ages and different animals and rocks and trees and everything and stars and if you have shared a certain kind of story that you find from a children's storybook or a curriculum that's already somebody wrote up, or if you don't find what you've taught yourself first in discovering, in dialoguing with the biblical text such that you come out with something really rich and in depth and distinctive somewhat. Yes. And then you make your own storybook. And it's about, because you read the Herman Cohen, let's say. So it's about how, from the one God, from the one reality behind everything, Elohim, comes everything. Each page you can have, some of the things, comes stones, comes seagulls, people, you and I, our parents, through the mind that God gave us, also our iPads and our automobiles, our airplanes. Everything comes from what the divine has put directly or potentially into the world. It's all like a big tree, with the roots. If you don't want to get into the upside down, if that might be too abstract but I think that it might be fun for them at that age. They have an imagination. And then you have the mural after, you have the sound and light show. You do it not so much by talking, but again, you have a multimedia kind of presentation or something. Oh, PowerPoint. Well, if it's PowerPoint, you don't want to just have it over there. You still want to involve them in between some of the slides. You know, some of what you show up there, you want to have them hold it in their own hand and have them do something with it. You know, just like you would with adults. But it would be of a different sort of, as I say, less, not abstract, but concrete and personal and hands-on. And then you can have PowerPoint as part of, woven intermittently. And then we used to just call it a multimedia show or something, with a slideshow. But again, not just having it up there without the involvement of people in between. And then you do the mural. So they go over to the mural, the big paper, and you'll already have the big tree and a couple of the leaves, the branches would, already there. And then when the kid gets to, when the child gets to the 6th or 7th or 8th grade, and somebody says, oh yeah, one of his teachers in public school or one of his friends says, oh yeah, the Bible's pretty primitive. I mean, because science tells us how the world was, came to be, and not really the Bible. And you'll say, well, I don't know, but I kind of vaguely remember when I was in the 1st grade, or the 3rd grade, or 4th grade, we learned that, there are other ideas in it, beautiful ideas, like that we all come from, from the same source that we call God. And everything, and we're all connected, like a big tree or something. I think we made. And and the person maybe will say, the teacher or someplace else, or the adult from someplace else, or one of the kids' friends. Oh yeah, but I mean, you don't believe in God, do you? And the student will maybe, hopefully, the student might be able to say how. Well, no, he doesn't believe, but he knows. That there's God, because God is a word like love or justice or whatever, but it stands for, it speaks to the following. And I feel it when I pray, and I feel it when I'm in nature, and I feel it when I'm with people that love me, and I love them, etc. And but the student will also say, but even if you don't, if you're not sure, what you think about God, it's a wonderful idea, yes, that from the one, call it source, call it spirit, call it whatever is behind this universe. It all comes from one point, from one, and that everything is related, even though we're all too often at odds with one another, with other cultures, with other peoples, other religions. With other creatures, with animals, with etc. When maybe there are ways that we don't have to be or shouldn't be. So again, one still has to go this intellectual route and this personal route of teaching in an in-depth way, of learning in an in-depth way to myself. Well, at the end of the other recording video that I made yesterday, you'll hear there the three that are after the first week. Excuse me. After next week, they'll be devoted to Kohelet, a piece of curriculum. Then we're just going to we'll have 2 more weeks, and we'll devote that entirely to working on our last opportunity for within the context of our course, for thinking about what we can take away from this course. Before I knew this, I felt this about this and that in Judaism and in Jewish education, but now maybe I see something a little bit different as a possibility. I'm not sure what I can ultimately, what I'll adopt or adapt, as I say, from it as part of my my experience and my understanding of my experience and my practice in life, the way I live, and then, only then, as a teacher, as an educator, how I'll share of my Jewish humanity with others and invite them, ask if I can collaborate, if I can join them in the development of their lives and experiences, and how they think about those experiences and think about and live those lives, their lives. And so, this is where we're going. We'll help each other in the discussion forums for the last 2 weeks. We'll be sharing, there won't be, as I say, new texts or anything new that I'll be bringing. But rather, as we work on really, we should begin now to work on this. There'll be an extra week or two after the course, at the end of, after in another 3 weeks. But I don't know how long, because grades, that I have to report. And by the way, as to grades, I'm going to be asking you at the end of the course to, in the end of the course might happen only in 2 years for you or whatever, in the sense that, what we learn, that we may realize some further time, But I'm going to ask each of us to write up a page of self-evaluation vis-a-vis the requirements of the course as I laid them out in the syllabus and in that 25-page, kind of little booklet there in the beginning of the course, yes, about what kind of intellectual engagement this professor is looking for, that you should try on for size, try out hypothetically. So in relation to those approaches and involvements which I've suggested that each of us require of ourselves if we want to derive the maximum from the course. And then beyond that, your own, what you require of yourself, and where you were before the course and where you are now, if you had to give it an evaluation in words, what would you write? How write that up in, a page or so, two. And then if you had to give yourself a letter grade, I guess we do at universities often in Israel, it's a percentage, but if we have to give ourselves a letter grade, what letter grade would you give? And then, if I strongly disagree with you, I'll ask you about it. But if I don't too strongly, I'm not the FBI, you're the ones who really know the best. So can a student then be dishonest with himself, herself, and/or with the teacher, with the professor? Yes. But, as I say, I'm not the FBI. That's not my, that's not, that's not up to me. That's not my business, really, my job. All right. So I think we're on the move, I hope. I'm trying for all of us to be included in going together and moving together. And so let's see. As I say, we have a good few days left now in this week's explorations. And then we continue.